The fluorescent lights of Berg International hummed their familiar tune at 11:47 p.m., casting sterile shadows across the empty executive lobby. Most of the building slept, but Isabella Romero moved through the corridors like a ghost with purpose, her soft-soled shoes barely whispering against the polished marble floors. She had perfected the art of invisibility over 13 years. Her dark red uniform blended into the corporate landscape like wallpaper, noticed only when something went wrong. Tonight, like every night, she navigated between conference rooms and executive offices, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces that gleamed under the security lighting. Isabella paused at the digital directory in the main lobby, adjusting her hairnet as she read the scrolling announcements. Tomorrow's schedule showed back-to-back international meetings, Japanese investors at 9, German manufacturing partners at 2, Brazilian suppliers at 4. The building would buzz with accents and languages, handshakes worth millions, and deals that could reshape markets. She understood every word they would speak. At the elevator bank, Isabella noticed an elderly Asian man studying the directory with obvious confusion. His expensive suit suggested importance, but his furrowed brow told a different story. Security had probably let him up early for tomorrow's meeting, and now he was lost. "Excuse me," she said softly in Japanese, her pronunciation crisp and natural. "Are you looking for the executive conference rooms?" The man's face brightened immediately. "Yes, yes." "The Sakura meeting room. I'm here early to prepare for tomorrow's presentation." 18th floor, East Wing, Isabella replied, still in Japanese. "The elevators are card-activated after hours. I can take you up." As they rode the elevator together, the man chatted comfortably about his nervousness regarding tomorrow's negotiations. Isabella listened with genuine interest, occasionally offering encouragement. When the doors opened, she walked him to the correct conference room and wished him luck. "Your Japanese is exceptional," he said before she left. "Have you spent time in Japan?" Isabella smiled modestly. "Only in books and conversation practice. Have a good evening, Tanaka-san." She returned to her routine, but her mind lingered on tomorrow's meetings. In her years of night shifts, she had overheard countless international negotiations. She knew which deals succeeded and which failed, often understanding the cultural miscommunications that derailed promising partnerships. But she was furniture, functional, necessary, and largely ignored. 3 floors up, in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Fort Worth's skyline, Marcus Chen reviewed his presentation for the 10th time. At 34, he had built his reputation as Berg International's go-to person for Asian markets. His Harvard MBA hung prominently behind his desk, flanked by photos from business trips to Tokyo, Seoul, and Shanghai. Marcus prided himself on his linguistic abilities. His Mandarin was excellent. He'd spent summers in Beijing during college. His Japanese was solid enough for business negotiations, though he occasionally relied on translators for complex technical discussions. His Spanish served him well with Latin American clients, even if his accent betrayed his American upbringing. What Marcus valued most was control. In boardrooms filled with executives twice his age, his language skills gave him an edge. He could build rapport, catch nuances that others missed, and position himself as indispensable to Harburg's international expansion. Tomorrow's meeting with the Tokyo investors represented the culmination of 6 months of careful relationship building. The $50 million partnership would establish Berg as the exclusive North American distributor for Yamamoto Industries' revolutionary logistics software. It was the kind of deal that could fast-track his promotion to senior vice president. Marcus had rehearsed his opening remarks in Japanese dozens of times. He would begin with proper formal greetings, acknowledge the honor of their visit, and then smoothly transition into the partnership proposal. The investors would be impressed by his cultural sensitivity and language skills, just as they always were. He glanced at his watch. 12:15 a.m. Time to head home and get some rest before the biggest presentation of his career. As Marcus gathered his papers, Isabella finished cleaning the conference room where tomorrow's meeting would take place. She arranged the chairs with military precision, ensured the presentation screen was spotless, and placed fresh water glasses at each seat. She had performed this ritual hundreds of times, preparing spaces for conversations that would shape the company's future while remaining invisible to those who mattered. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow the invisible would become undeniably visible. The morning of the Tokyo meeting arrived with the crisp efficiency that Marcus Chen had orchestrated. By 8:30 a.m., the 18th floor conference room buzzed with nervous energy. Junior associates arranged documents while IT technicians tested the presentation equipment. Marcus stood at the head of the table, adjusting his silk tie and reviewing his notes one final time. At precisely 9 a.m., the elevator doors opened to reveal 5 impeccably dressed Japanese executives led by Hiroshi Yamamoto himself, CEO of Yamamoto Industries. Marcus stepped forward with practiced confidence, bowing at exactly the right angle, 15 degrees for business equals, and began his carefully rehearsed greeting. "Yamamoto-san, welcome to Harburg International," Marcus said in Japanese, his pronunciation clear and respectful. "It is an honor to have you here today." Yamamoto returned the bow with a slight smile. "Chen-san, thank you for your hospitality. We are excited to discuss this partnership opportunity." The meeting proceeded smoothly through the opening formalities. Marcus guided the group through Harburg's distribution network, highlighting their reach across North America and their track record with technology partnerships. The Japanese executives listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions that Marcus handled with growing confidence. 30 minutes into the presentation, they reached the crucial moment, defining the partnership structure. Marcus clicked to his key slide and began explaining the proposed relationship. "What we're offering," Marcus said, switching to Japanese for emphasis, "is a gente partnership with exclusive distribution rights across all of North America." The Japanese executives exchanged subtle glances. Yamamoto's eyebrows raised almost imperceptibly. The room's energy shifted in a way that Marcus couldn't quite read, but he pressed forward, explaining the revenue-sharing structure and market penetration strategies. Outside the conference room, Isabella moved quietly through her morning duties. She had switched to day shifts 6 months ago when a cleaning position opened up. The pay was slightly better, and it allowed her to see her daughter off to school each morning. She was emptying the trash bin near the conference room's glass wall when Marcus's words reached her ears. Isabella froze. Her hand tightened on the plastic liner as she processed what she had just heard. Marcus had just told the Yamamoto executives that Eightberg was offering a limited partnership instead of an exclusive partnership. The Japanese words were similar, gente partnership versus dokusenzeki partnership, but the business implications were vastly different. She glanced through the glass wall at the confused expressions on the Japanese executives' faces. They were trying to understand why Heiberg would propose limited distribution rights when the preliminary discussions had centered on exclusivity. Yamamoto was whispering urgently to his translator, who looked equally puzzled. Isabella faced a split-second decision. She could continue with her work, let the misunderstanding resolve itself, and maintain her invisibility. Or she could risk everything to prevent a $50 million deal from collapsing over a translation error. Inside the conference room, Marcus sensed something was wrong but couldn't identify the problem. The Japanese executives had become more formal, their questions sharper and more skeptical. When Yamamoto asked for clarification about the limited nature of the partnership, Marcus felt the first flutter of panic. "I'm not sure I understand your concern, Yamamoto-san," Marcus replied in Japanese. "We believe a gente partnership provides the best framework for mutual success." The translator leaned forward, speaking in rapid Japanese to Yamamoto, who frowned and shook his head. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. That's when Isabella gently knocked on the conference room door. Marcus looked up, irritated by the interruption. Through the glass, he saw a woman in a cleaning uniform holding a trash bag. He gestured dismissively, but Isabella knocked again, more insistently this time. "Excuse me for just a moment," Marcus told the group, stepping toward the door with barely concealed annoyance. Isabella took a deep breath as Marcus approached. Everything she had worked for, her job, her stability, her daughter's future, could disappear in the next 30 seconds. But she couldn't watch Harburg lose this deal over a simple misunderstanding. Marcus opened the door slightly. "We're in an important meeting," he whispered harshly. "Whatever this is, it can wait." "I'm sorry to interrupt," Isabella said quietly, "but I believe there's been a translation error." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Isabella glanced past him at the confused Japanese executives. "You said gente patonashipu, which means limited partnership. But based on their reactions, I think you meant dokusenzeki patonashipu, exclusive partnership." For a moment, Marcus stared at her in complete silence. The words hung in the air between them like an unexploded bomb. A janitor was correcting his Japanese in the middle of the most important meeting of his career. "You speak Japanese?" he managed to ask. "Yes, sir. And I believe—" "How much Japanese?" Marcus interrupted, his voice tight with disbelief. "I'm fluent, sir. And I think if you clarify the exclusivity—" Marcus felt heat rising in his chest. Not only had this woman overheard a private business meeting, but she was presuming to correct him in front of potential partners worth $50 million. The humiliation was so sharp and sudden that it took his breath away. But the Japanese executives were watching now, their curiosity clearly piqued by the conversation at the door. Yamamoto himself stood up and walked toward them. "Is there a problem, Chen-san?" Yamamoto asked in English. Marcus felt trapped between his wounded pride and the rapidly deteriorating meeting. He looked at Isabella, then at Yamamoto, and made a calculation that would haunt him for months. "This is Isabella," Marcus said stiffly. She speaks some Japanese." Yamamoto's eyebrows rose with interest. He addressed Isabella directly in rapid, formal Japanese. "Romero-san, did I understand correctly that you noticed a translation concern?" Isabella's response was flawless, not just in pronunciation, but in tone, formality level, and cultural nuance. "Yamamoto-san, I believe Chen-san intended to convey an exclusive partnership arrangement, but there may have been a slight linguistic confusion. Please forgive my intrusion." The effect was electric. Yamamoto's entire demeanor changed. He smiled genuinely for the first time all morning and replied in Japanese. "Your Japanese is exceptional. Where did you study?" "I studied linguistics in university and continued learning independently," Isabella responded, still maintaining perfect formality. "I have great respect for Japanese business culture and language." Marcus watched this exchange with growing horror. Not only was the janitor speaking perfect Japanese, but she was conducting a more sophisticated conversation than he could manage. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted, and he was no longer the linguistic bridge between cultures. Yamamoto turned to Marcus with a knowing smile. "Chen-san, I believe we have been talking about different types of partnerships. Could you clarify whether Harburg is proposing exclusive distribution rights?" Marcus felt his face burning. "Yes, of course. Exclusive rights. Dokusenzeki patonashipu." "Ah!" Yamamoto's entire team relaxed visibly. The translator nodded enthusiastically, and suddenly, the Japanese executives were smiling and engaging again. The meeting continued for another hour, but Marcus's confidence was shattered. Every time he spoke Japanese, he second-guessed himself. When technical questions arose, he found himself glancing toward the door, wondering if Isabella was still outside, still listening, still judging his inadequate language skills. The deal was saved. Yamamoto Industries agreed to the exclusive partnership, praising Berg's attention to cultural detail and linguistic precision. As the Japanese executives prepared to leave, Yamamoto specifically asked to speak with Isabella again. Romero-san, he said in Japanese, your intervention was very helpful today. Have you considered working in international business? Isabella smiled politely. I'm honored by your words, Yamamoto-san. I'm content with my current position. After the executives left, Marcus stood alone in the conference room, staring out the window at the Fort Worth skyline. The biggest deal of his career was secured, but he felt no triumph. Instead, a cold rage was building in his chest, not at the near disaster, but at the person who had prevented it. A janitor had saved his presentation. A janitor spoke better Japanese than he did. A janitor had made him look incompetent in front of $50 million worth of investors. Marcus Chen was not a man who accepted humiliation gracefully. And as he watched Isabella resume her quiet work in the corridor outside, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces as if nothing had happened, he began planning his response. Over the next few days, Marcus told himself he was simply being observant as he noticed Isabella's patterns. She arrived each morning at 7 a.m. sharp, worked methodically through the building's 12 floors, took her lunch break in the service-level break room, and finished her shift at 3:30 p.m. She was efficient, unobtrusive, and clearly intelligent, which made her threat all the more dangerous. Marcus began with small provocations. On Thursday, he scheduled an emergency cleanup in the executive conference room during Isabella's lunch break, knowing she would have to work through her meal or face a written warning for leaving assigned areas unfinished. On Friday, he conveniently moved several trash cans after Isabella had already cleaned those areas, forcing her to backtrack and creating the appearance of incomplete work. Isabella noticed these irregularities but attributed them to coincidence. She had learned, through 13 years of invisible labor, to adapt quietly to changing circumstances. When Marcus began leaving passive-aggressive notes about attention to detail and professional boundaries, she simply worked harder and remained silent. But Marcus was just getting started. The humiliation of that Tuesday morning had metastasized into something darker, more personal. Every time a colleague mentioned the successful Yamamoto deal, Marcus felt the sting of knowing he hadn't really saved it. Every time he used his Japanese in subsequent meetings, he wondered if Isabella was somewhere nearby, listening, judging, preparing to correct him again. By the end of her second week under Marcus's scrutiny, Isabella finally understood what was happening. This wasn't coincidence or corporate inefficiency. This was systematic harassment. And as she stood in the supply closet after another day of impossible schedules and manufactured emergencies, she faced a terrible choice: fight back and risk everything, or endure silently and hope Marcus would eventually lose interest. She thought about her daughter Sophia, 26 and finishing her nursing degree. She thought about the rent payment due next week, the car repair bills sitting on her kitchen counter, and the health insurance that kept her afloat in a world that seemed designed to drown people like her. Isabella Romero had spent 13 years being invisible. Now she would have to decide if speaking up was worth becoming visible in all the wrong ways. But she didn't know yet that her choice would soon be made for her, or that Marcus Chen's campaign against her would ultimately reveal talents that even she had forgotten she possessed. The stage was set, the battle lines were drawn, and in the pristine corridors of Harburg International, a war was about to begin between a man who demanded respect and a woman who had earned it, but never received it. The harassment began in earnest the following Monday morning. Isabella arrived at 7 a.m. to find her supply cart locked in the wrong storage room, her cleaning schedule mysteriously updated to include 3 additional floors, and a terse note from facilities management about improved efficiency standards. What should have been a manageable 8-hour shift had become a mathematical impossibility. Marcus watched from the executive floor's windows as Isabella hurried between buildings, her cart loaded with extra supplies, her usual calm composure strained by the impossible timeline. He felt a dark satisfaction seeing her struggle. This was about more than embarrassment now. It was about establishing proper hierarchy. Janitors didn't correct executives. They certainly didn't humiliate Harvard MBAs in front of $50 million clients. By Wednesday, Marcus had recruited allies. During the weekly management meeting, he painted Isabella's behavior as inappropriate boundary crossing and unprofessional eavesdropping. "I'm not saying she had malicious intent," Marcus told the group, his voice carefully measured, "but we need to maintain clear professional boundaries. Service staff listening in on confidential negotiations, offering unsolicited input. It sets a dangerous precedent." Sarah Walsh from Human Resources nodded thoughtfully. "Have there been other incidents?" "She seems to linger around international meetings," Marcus replied, letting the implication hang in the air. "I've noticed her cleaning the same areas multiple times when we have foreign visitors." It wasn't technically a lie. Isabella did clean thoroughly around international meetings, because those were often the messiest, with coffee spills and scattered documents. But Marcus's framing transformed diligence into suspicious behavior. Within days, Isabella found herself under increased scrutiny. Her keycard access was restricted to essential areas only. Her cleaning supplies were relocated to a basement storage room that required a 10-minute round trip. Most damaging of all, she was assigned to work under Janet Morrison, a facilities supervisor who took Marcus's concerns very seriously. "Ms. Romero," Janet said during Isabella's review meeting, "we've had reports about you exceeding your assigned duties. Your job is cleaning, not customer service." Isabella sat quietly in the sterile HR office, her hands folded in her lap. "I was only trying to help a confused visitor find the correct floor." "That's what security is for," Janet replied sharply. "And we've had concerns about you lingering near sensitive business meetings." "I clean the conference rooms. That's my assignment." "Moving forward, you'll clean those areas only when they're unoccupied. No exceptions." The new restrictions were crushing. Isabella could no longer help lost visitors, even when she was the only person available. She had to wait for conference rooms to empty completely before cleaning, which pushed her schedule deeper into the afternoon and made her already difficult day nearly impossible. But the worst part was the isolation. Other cleaning staff began avoiding her, afraid of being associated with someone under management scrutiny. The security guards, who had previously chatted with her during quiet moments, now watched her with suspicious eyes. Isabella endured it all with grim determination. She needed this job. Her daughter Sophia was in her final semester of nursing school, and Isabella's health insurance was the only thing standing between Sophia and crushing student debt. She couldn't afford to fight back. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in Isabella's third week under Marcus's campaign. She was cleaning the executive conference room after a particularly long day when she overheard voices from the adjacent office. Through the thin walls, she could hear Marcus speaking with someone in what sounded like German, but his pronunciation was so mangled that she winced involuntarily. "Wir möchten eine, partnership mit Ihrer manufacturing process," Marcus was saying, mixing English words into German sentence structure. Isabella recognized the voice responding to him. Klaus Weber from Weber Manufacturing, one of Berg's most important German suppliers. Weber was speaking slowly and simply, clearly struggling to understand Marcus's broken German. "Perhaps we could continue in English," Weber suggested politely, his relief evident. Nein, I speak good Deutsch," Marcus insisted, his pride overriding practicality. "Wir haben sehr good Qualität control systems." Isabella found herself frozen, mop in hand, as she listened to a crucial business relationship deteriorating due to linguistic incompetence. Weber was one of their most important partners. Harburg's entire Midwest distribution network depended on Weber's precision-engineered logistics equipment. But she had learned her lesson. Helping Marcus once had resulted in weeks of harassment. She would not make that mistake again. She finished cleaning in silence and left Marcus to struggle through his painful conversation with increasingly confused German responses filtering through the wall. The next morning, Isabella arrived to find her locker had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but her personal items had been rifled through, her spare uniform wrinkled and tossed aside. When she reported it to security, they suggested she had probably forgotten to lock it properly. That afternoon, she discovered someone had sabotaged her supply cart. The wheels had been loosened, causing it to collapse spectacularly in the middle of the executive corridor, spilling cleaning solution across the expensive carpet. As she scrambled to clean up the mess, executives stepped around her with barely concealed annoyance. "Really sorry about this," said David Kim, a young marketing intern who knelt down to help her gather scattered supplies. "That looked like the wheels just gave out." Isabella glanced up at him. Korean-American, maybe 25, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Thank you, but you don't need to." "My grandmother was a housekeeper for 40 years, David said quietly, continuing to help despite her protests. "She always said you could tell a person's character by how they treated the cleaning staff." It was the first genuine kindness Isabella had experienced in weeks. She felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Besides," David added, lowering his voice further, "I've been watching what's happening to you, and it's not right." Isabella looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" David glanced around, then leaned closer. "I've seen Marcus moving your supplies, changing your schedules. I've heard him talking to other managers about you, and I don't think it's because you did anything wrong." That evening, Isabella sat in her small apartment's kitchen, staring at a stack of bills while Sophia studied at the dining table. The rent was due in 3 days. Sophia's final semester tuition payment was due in 2 weeks. Isabella's car was making concerning noises that probably meant expensive repairs. She couldn't afford to lose this job, but she also couldn't endure much more of Marcus's escalating harassment. "Mum, you look exhausted," Sophia said, looking up from her nursing textbooks. "Is everything okay at work?" Isabella forced a smile. "Just busy season. How are your studies going?" "Good. I should have my RN license by summer." Sophia hesitated. "Mum, I've been thinking, maybe I should take a semester off, get a job to help with expenses." "Absolutely not," Isabella said firmly. "You're 3 months from graduation. We'll manage." But privately, Isabella wondered how. The harassment was affecting her performance. The impossible schedules and constant stress were wearing her down. How long before Janet Morrison found an excuse to fire her? Her phone buzzed with a text from David Kim. "Saw M talking to facilities again today. Be careful." Isabella stared at the message, surprised by the young intern's continued concern. In 13 years of cleaning corporate offices, no one had ever warned her about office politics or tried to protect her from management harassment. Maybe she wasn't as invisible as she thought. The crisis came the following Tuesday morning. Isabella was restocking supplies in the basement storage room when her pager buzzed with an emergency code. Facilities needed immediate cleanup on the 18th floor. Someone had spilled coffee all over the executive conference room just before a crucial meeting. She grabbed her emergency kit and hurried upstairs, arriving to find chaos. Coffee covered the marble table and expensive leather chairs. Worse, the liquid was seeping toward a stack of presentation materials and someone's open laptop. Isabella worked quickly, containing the spill and protecting the electronics. She was halfway through cleaning the leather chairs when voices echoed from the corridor. Marcus was returning with what sounded like several German-speaking visitors. Isabella's heart sank. She was trapped. The new protocols required her to leave immediately when executives returned, but she was in the middle of preventing permanent damage to furniture worth more than her annual salary. She tried to clean faster, but it was too late. Marcus entered with 3 men in expensive suits, speaking in his broken German about quarterly reports and manufacturing specifications. "Entschuldigung," one of the Germans said, noticing Isabella. "Are we interrupting?" "Nein, Marcus replied, his face darkening as he saw Isabella still in the room. "She was just leaving, weren't you?" The last phrase he directed at Isabella in English, his tone sharp with warning. Isabella nodded and began gathering her supplies, but Klaus Weber, the same executive Marcus had struggled to communicate with the previous week, stepped forward. "Einen Moment bitte," Weber said, then switched to English. You are the cleaning lady, yes? Your German pronunciation just now was quite good. Isabella froze. She had apologized in German reflexively without thinking. Marcus's face went white. She doesn't speak German. She was just parroting what she heard. But Weber was intrigued. He addressed Isabella directly in rapid German. Where did you learn to speak German? Your accent suggests formal training. The question hung in the air. Isabella looked at Marcus, whose expression had shifted from embarrassment to something approaching panic. She could lie, pretend she didn't understand, maintain the fiction that janitors don't speak the languages of international business. Or she could tell the truth and face whatever consequences followed. I studied linguistics in university, Isabella replied in perfect German. I've always been interested in languages and cultures. Weber's eyebrows shot up. He turned to his colleagues and began speaking in rapid, excited German about Isabella's pronunciation and vocabulary. One of them asked her about regional dialects, another about business terminology. Isabella answered each question with growing confidence, her formal education finally finding an outlet after years of suppression. Marcus watched this exchange with mounting horror. Once again, the janitor was outshining him linguistically. But this time was worse. These weren't just visitors who would leave after a meeting. These were crucial partners who would remember this moment, who would wonder why Heiberg's head of international relations spoke worse German than their cleaning staff. I think we should focus on business matters, Marcus interrupted in English, his voice strained. But the Germans were fascinated. They asked Isabella about her background, her education, her thoughts on German business culture. She answered with the intelligence and insight of someone who had studied these topics formally, not just memorized business phrases. This is remarkable, Weber told his colleagues in German. She understands the cultural nuances better than most of our American partners. When the Germans finally left an hour later, they shook hands with Isabella as warmly as they did with Marcus. Weber handed her his business card. If you ever consider a career change, he said in German, we could use someone with your cultural understanding in our international division. After they left, Marcus and Isabella stood alone in the conference room. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. You did that on purpose, Marcus said finally, his voice low and dangerous. I was doing my job, Isabella replied calmly. Your job is cleaning, not impressing our clients with your hidden talents. Isabella met his gaze steadily. I wasn't hiding anything. I was responding politely to their questions. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Let me make something very clear. You're a janitor. You clean floors, empty trash, and stay invisible. You don't speak in meetings, you don't impress clients, and you certainly don't make me look incompetent. I wasn't trying to... Twice now, Marcus continued, his anger barely controlled. You've undermined me in front of international partners. There won't be a third time. Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. The mask had finally slipped. This wasn't about professional boundaries or proper protocols. This was personal. Mr. Chen, she said carefully, I was only trying to help. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Help? You want to help? Then remember your place. You're replaceable. There are 100 people who would take your job tomorrow. But me? I'm irreplaceable. I have connections, credentials, influence. Cross me again, and you'll discover just how replaceable you really are. He left Isabella standing alone in the conference room, Klaus Weber's business card still in her trembling hand. That evening, David Kim found Isabella in the parking garage as she was leaving work. She was sitting in her car, staring straight ahead, not moving. He tapped gently on her window. When she rolled it down, he could see she had been crying. I saw what happened today, he said softly, with the German executives. Isabella wiped her eyes. I shouldn't have spoken. I should have just left. You were amazing in there. I don't speak German, but I could tell they were impressed. It doesn't matter. I made everything worse. David leaned against her car door. Can I tell you something? Marcus Chen is not as untouchable as he thinks. I've been documenting what he's been doing to you. The schedule changes, the supply problems, the way he talks about you in meetings. Isabella looked at him in surprise. Why would you do that? Because someone needs to. And because... He hesitated. My family came here from Korea when I was young. My parents worked jobs they were overqualified for because their degrees didn't count here. I watched brilliant people treated like they were stupid just because of their accents or their positions. He pulled out his phone and showed her a video. I recorded Marcus talking to Janet Morrison yesterday. He's planning to get you fired by the end of the month. Isabella's stomach dropped. How? He's going to manufacture a complaint about you accessing restricted areas during business meetings. Say you were eavesdropping on confidential negotiations. Isabella closed her eyes. She had walked into a trap and Marcus was about to spring it. But here's the thing, David continued. I think there are people in this company who would be very interested in your language skills. The right people. You just need to get to them before Marcus can destroy you. Isabella looked at this young man who barely knew her, but was risking his own position to help. Why are you doing this? David smiled sadly. Because my grandmother always said that talent trapped in the wrong place is one of the world's greatest tragedies, and because someone needs to stand up to bullies like Marcus Chen. As Isabella drove home that night, Klaus Weber's business card on her dashboard and David's warning echoing in her mind, she made a decision. She had spent 13 years being invisible, 13 years staying in her place, 13 years accepting that her intelligence and abilities didn't matter because of the uniform she wore. But Marcus Chen had made a crucial mistake. In his effort to humiliate her, he had revealed her talents to people who could appreciate them. Weber's card proved that her abilities had value, that she wasn't just a janitor who happened to speak languages, she was a linguist who happened to clean floors. The war wasn't over. In fact, it was about to escalate in ways that neither Isabella nor Marcus could anticipate. But for the first time in months, Isabella felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Tomorrow she would stop hiding. Tomorrow she would remind Heiberg International that greatness doesn't wear a uniform. It wears whatever clothes it can afford. And Marcus Chen was about to learn that the most dangerous enemy is the one you underestimate. CEO Alfredo Sariana had built his reputation on late nights and early mornings, but tonight's overtime session was different. The quarterly reports spread across his desk painted a troubling picture. International partnerships were stagnating, cultural miscommunications were costing deals, and their competitors were gaining ground in global markets. At 11:30 p.m., Sariana decided to take a walk through the building to clear his head. The executive floors were tomb quiet, but as he descended toward the parking garage, he heard voices echoing from the 18th floor conference room. He paused, recognizing Marcus Chen's voice, but couldn't make out the words. Curious, Sariana approached the glass-walled room and stopped dead in his tracks. Through the transparent walls, he could see Marcus cornering a woman in a cleaning uniform against the conference table. His body language was aggressive, intimidating, and his voice, though muffled by the glass, carried the unmistakable tone of a threat. "Remember your place," Marcus was saying as Sariana moved closer. "You're replaceable. There are 100 people who would take your job tomorrow. But me? I'm irreplaceable." Sariana felt his jaw tighten. In 20 years of building Berg International, he had cultivated a culture of respect and professionalism. What he was witnessing violated every principle he held dear. The woman, Isabella according to her name tag, stood with quiet dignity despite being cornered. Her posture was calm, professional, and completely at odds with Marcus's aggressive stance. "Mr. Chen," she said in a voice that carried clearly through the glass, "I was only trying to help." Marcus laughed harshly. "Help? You want to help? Then remember your place." Sariana had heard enough. He pushed open the conference room door just as Marcus was delivering his final threat. "Cross me again, and you'll discover just how replaceable you really are." Both Marcus and Isabella spun toward the door. Marcus's face went white when he saw his CEO standing in the doorway. "Mr. Chen," Sariana said, his voice deadly quiet, "I believe you have somewhere else to be." Marcus scrambled for composure. "Mr. Sariana, I was just discussing protocols with—" "Leave! Now!" Marcus grabbed his jacket and hurried past Sariana without another word. When the door closed behind him, Sariana turned his attention to Isabella, who was gathering her cleaning supplies with trembling hands. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. Isabella nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, just a misunderstanding." Sariana studied her face. Even in the harsh fluorescent lighting, he could see intelligence in her eyes, dignity in her bearing. This was not someone who deserved to be bullied by a middle manager with an ego problem. "What's your name?" "Isabella Romero, sir." "How long have you worked here, Isabella?" 13 years, sir." 13 years. Sariana felt a pang of guilt. How many conversations like the one he'd just witnessed had happened without his knowledge? How many talented people were being overlooked, intimidated, or driven away by managers like Marcus? What was Mr. Chen upset about? Isabella hesitated. She could feel the weight of this moment, the sense that her answer might determine her future at Harburg. "There was a misunderstanding during a meeting with German partners," she said carefully. "I helped with translation when communication became difficult." Sariana's eyebrows raised. "You speak German?" "Yes, sir. Among others." "How many others?" Isabella met his gaze. After weeks of harassment and humiliation, she was tired of hiding. 9 languages total, sir. Plus Latin, though I suppose that doesn't count for business purposes. Sariana stared at her for a long moment. 9 languages. Yes, sir. And you've been cleaning our offices for 13 years. Yes, sir. Something shifted in Sariana's expression. He looked around the conference room, at the walls covered with maps showing Berg's global operations, at the presentation materials scattered on the table, at the woman in front of him, who apparently spoke more languages than his entire international division. "Isabella," he said slowly, "would you mind if we continued this conversation in my office?" 20 minutes later, Isabella sat across from Sariana's desk, a cup of coffee warming her hands as she told her story. She spoke without self-pity or resentment, simply laying out the facts: her linguistics degree, her mother's illness, the choices that had led her to a janitor's uniform, and the years of invisible competence that had followed. Sariana listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, his expression growing more thoughtful with each detail. "The German executives today," he said when she finished. "What exactly happened?" Isabella described the conference room encounter, Weber's enthusiastic response to her language skills, and Marcus's subsequent threats. "Klaus Weber gave you his business card?" "Yes, sir." Isabella pulled it from her pocket, slightly crumpled from nervous handling. Sariana examined the card. Weber was one of their most important partners, a notoriously difficult man who valued precision and cultural understanding above all else. "What did he say exactly?" "He offered me a position in their international division, sir, but I wasn't interested. I like working here." The simple statement hit Sariana like a physical blow. Here was a woman who had been harassed, threatened, and systematically undermined, yet she still expressed loyalty to the company. "Isabella," Sariana said carefully, "what would you say if I told you that what happened to you tonight was completely unacceptable? That no employee, regardless of their position, should face intimidation or threats?" Isabella looked at him with surprise. "I would say that's very kind of you to say, sir." "It's not kindness, it's policy, and I intend to enforce it." Sariana leaned back in his chair, studying the woman across from him. In the space of an hour, she had shattered his assumptions about talent, hierarchy, and the hidden potential within his own company. "Tell me about the Japanese meeting," he said. "The one where you helped Mr. Cheney." Isabella described the Yamamoto Industries incident, her decision to intervene, and the successful outcome. "So you saved a $50 million deal?" "Mr. Chen saved the deal, sir. I just helped with a small translation issue." Sariana smiled. Even now, facing potential termination, she was generous with credit and modest about her contributions. Isabella, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before answering. If you could design your ideal position at this company, unlimited by current job descriptions or department structures, what would it look like? Isabella was quiet for a long moment. The question felt like a trap, but Sariana's expression was genuinely curious. I suppose, she said slowly, I would want to help international partners feel welcome and understood. Too often, I've seen deals fail, not because of numbers or logistics, but because of cultural misunderstandings or communication barriers. I would want to bridge those gaps. A cultural liaison position? Something like that, yes. Someone who could facilitate communication, help avoid the kind of problems that happened with Mr. Chen and the German executives. Sariana made more notes. What would you need to be effective in such a role? Honestly, just the opportunity to use my skills. I've been listening to international negotiations for 13 years. I understand the patterns, the common mistakes, the cultural sensitivities that make or break partnerships. Any concerns about transitioning from cleaning to corporate work? Isabella smiled slightly. Sir, I've been managing complex schedules, solving problems, and dealing with difficult personalities for 13 years. The only difference would be the uniform. The next morning, Sariana began his investigation in earnest. He pulled security footage from the past month, reviewed Isabella's employment record, and conducted quiet interviews with other staff members. What he discovered made his blood boil. Marcus Chen had conducted a systematic campaign of harassment that violated every company policy regarding workplace respect and employee dignity. The evidence was overwhelming. Deliberate schedule manipulations, false complaints, intimidation tactics, and abuse of authority. But the investigation also revealed something else: Isabella's extraordinary competence. Security footage showed her helping confused visitors, solving cleaning emergencies with remarkable efficiency, and consistently going above and beyond her assigned duties. Her employment record was spotless, 13 years without a single legitimate complaint. More damning for Marcus, Sariana discovered that several recent successes in international relations were actually Isabella's informal contributions. The Yamamoto deal was just the most visible example. She had quietly prevented cultural miscommunications, court translation errors, and smoothed over diplomatic rough spots for years. On Wednesday afternoon, Sariana called Marcus to his office. Marcus entered with his usual confidence, but Sariana's expression was arctic. "Sit down, Mr. Chen." Marcus sat, already sensing trouble. "I've completed an investigation into your interactions with Isabella Romero," Sariana began without preamble. "What I found was a pattern of harassment, intimidation, and abuse of authority that violates every principle this company stands for." Marcus's face went pale. "Sir, I can explain." "You can't," Sariana interrupted. "I have security footage. I have documented evidence. I have witness statements. More importantly, I witnessed your behavior personally on Tuesday night." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but Sariana continued. "Here's what I find most interesting, Mr. Chen. In reviewing your performance, I discovered that several of your recent successes were actually the result of Ms. Romero's informal assistance. The Yamamoto deal that you've been taking credit for? She saved it. The Weber partnership that nearly fell apart last month? She prevented the cultural miscommunication that would have ended it." "She's just a janitor," Marcus said desperately. "She was overstepping her boundaries." "She's a linguistics expert with 9 years of university education who has been subsidizing your incompetence for months," Sariana snapped. "And you responded to her help by trying to destroy her career." Marcus realized his situation was hopeless, but his pride wouldn't let him surrender quietly. "You can't possibly be considering promoting a janitor over someone with my credentials," he said. "I have an MBA from Harvard. I have years of international business experience. She cleans toilets." Sariana's expression turned to disgust. "Mr. Chen, Your credentials clearly didn't teach you basic human decency. Your experience apparently consists of taking credit for other people's work. And your attitude demonstrates exactly why this company needs to change. He slid a termination letter across the desk. You're fired. Security will escort you out. And if you ever contact Ms. Romero or attempt to interfere with her employment anywhere, I will personally ensure that every company in this industry knows exactly what kind of manager you are. That afternoon, Sariana asked Isabella to meet him in his office again. This time she arrived to find David Kim waiting as well. Isabella, Sariana began, I want you to meet David Kim from our marketing division. David has been documenting Mr. Chen's harassment of you. Isabella looked at David with surprise and gratitude. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, David interrupted. Someone needed to stand up for what was right. Sariana smiled. David will be joining us because I believe he understands something important about recognizing hidden talent. But first, Isabella, I need to tell you that Marcus Chen is no longer with the company. Isabella's eyes widened. Sir, I never asked for him to be fired. You didn't need to ask. His behavior was unacceptable by any standard, but that's not why you're here. Sariana leaned forward. Isabella, I want to offer you a position as Director of Global Cultural Relations. It would involve managing international partnerships, facilitating cross-cultural communication, and developing programs to better integrate our global operations. Isabella stared at him in shock. Sir, I don't have any corporate experience. You have 13 years of watching corporate failures and successes. You have language skills that money can't buy. Most importantly, you have the intelligence and judgment to prevent the kind of costly mistakes that have been plaguing our international division. But people will say a lot of things, Sariana interrupted. Some will question the decision, others will celebrate it. What matters is that you're the right person for this job. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what was being offered. What about my daughter? My current schedule allows me to be home when she needs me. The position includes flexible scheduling and a substantial salary increase. You'll be able to support your daughter's career while building your own. Isabella looked at David, who was grinning encouragingly, then back at Sariana. Sir, may I ask why you're doing this? Sariana's expression grew serious. Because for too long, this company has been blind to the talent right in front of us. We've confused credentials with competence, position with potential. You represent everything we claim to value, but have failed to recognize. He stood up and extended his hand. More than that, Isabella, you've reminded me that leadership isn't about protecting the status quo. It's about having the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult. Isabella stood and shook his hand. I accept, Mr. Sariana, but I have one request. Name it. I'd like to keep my old uniform, as a reminder of where I came from. Sariana smiled. Absolutely. 6 months later, Isabella Romero stood at the podium of the International Business Leadership Conference in Cincinnati, looking out at an audience of corporate executives, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders. She wore a navy blue suit that fit perfectly, but pinned to her lapel was a small enamel badge. Her old janitor's ID, transformed into a symbol of pride rather than shame. I want to begin with a simple truth, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium. Talent doesn't wear a uniform. Intelligence doesn't require permission. And brilliance can be found in the most unexpected places. She paused, letting her words settle over the audience. 18 months ago, I was invisible. I spent my days cleaning the offices of Harburg International, listening to international negotiations, watching deals succeed and fail, understanding the cultural nuances that make or break global partnerships. I had 9 years of university education, spoke 10 languages, and had solutions to problems that were costing my company millions of dollars. Another pause. But I was just the janitor, so no one asked my opinion. No one valued my insights. No one saw my potential. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. That changed because one man, My CEO, Alfredo Sariana, had the courage to look beyond my uniform and see my capabilities. But more importantly, it changed because I finally had the courage to stop hiding my talents. Isabella's voice grew stronger, more passionate. How many brilliant minds are we overlooking because they don't look the way we expect brilliance to look? How many solutions are we missing because we're not listening to the right voices? How many innovations are we losing because we've decided that value only comes from certain backgrounds, certain schools, certain positions? She looked directly at the audience. I challenge each of you to go back to your companies and look, really look, at the people around you. The security guard who speaks 4 languages, the receptionist who has a master's degree in engineering, the cleaning staff who understand your business better than some of your executives. Isabella smiled, thinking of the transformation at Harburg over the past months. In the 6 months since I became Director of Global Cultural Relations, our international revenue has increased by 40%. We've closed deals that had been stalled for years. We've avoided cultural miscommunications that would have cost millions. Not because I'm exceptional, but because someone finally asked me to contribute. She gestured to the audience. Your hidden talent is out there. The question is, are you brave enough to find it? Are you humble enough to recognize that brilliance doesn't always come with the credentials you expect? Are you wise enough to understand that the most valuable employee in your company might be the one you're overlooking? Isabella's voice rose to a crescendo. Don't wait for someone else to discover the Isabella Romeros in your organization. Be the leader who sees potential where others see position. Be the executive who values ability over appearance. Be the person who remembers that every expert was once a beginner, every leader was once overlooked, and every success story started with someone who was brave enough to be seen. The standing ovation began slowly, with scattered applause that grew into thunderous approval. People rose to their feet, some wiping tears from their eyes, others nodding with recognition and determination. As Isabella left the stage, she was approached by a young woman in a hotel uniform. "Ma'am," the woman said quietly, "I'm a housekeeper here. I have a degree in computer science from my home country, but no one will hire me for technical work." Isabella stopped and gave the woman her full attention. "What's your name?" "Maria Santos." Isabella reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "Maria, I want you to call my assistant tomorrow. We're always looking for talented people who understand technology and global markets." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that?" Isabella smiled and placed a gentle hand on Maria's shoulder. "Someone once took a chance on a janitor who spoke too many languages. Now it's my turn to pay it forward." As Isabella walked through the hotel lobby, past the executives discussing million-dollar deals and international strategies, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The years of invisibility, the harassment and humiliation, the moment when she finally found her voice. It had all led to this. But more than her personal transformation, she thought about the ripple effects. David Kim was now heading Berg's new talent development program. Klaus Weber had become one of their strongest international advocates. Even Janet Morrison from HR had changed her approach to employee development after seeing Isabella's success. Change was possible. Hidden talent could be found. Brilliance could be recognized, regardless of the uniform it wore. Isabella Romero had spent 13 years cleaning offices and listening to conversations about changing the world. Now she was finally part of those conversations herself. And she was just getting started. 1 year later, Berg International received the Global Leadership in Diversity Award, recognizing their innovative approach to talent development and cultural integration. The ceremony took place in the building's main conference room, the same room where Isabella had once cleaned up after meetings she wasn't allowed to attend. As Alfredo Sariana accepted the award, he looked out at an audience that included Isabella Romero, Director of Global Cultural Relations, David Kim, VP of Internal Talent Development, and Maria Santos, recently promoted to Senior Systems Analyst after completing Hateberg's new credential recognition program. "This award," Sariana said, "belongs to everyone who has had the courage to see potential where others see position, to recognize brilliance wherever it appears, and to remember that the most important conversation in any company is the one we have with the people we've been overlooking." In the back of the room, Isabella smiled and touched the small badge on her lapel, her old janitor's ID, now a symbol of possibility. She had kept her promise to bring extra chairs to the table. Now it was up to others to decide who deserved to sit in them. The revolution had begun with a single voice speaking truth in a language everyone could understand, the language of human dignity, hidden potential, and the courage to see beyond the surface. And it was far from over.